Commander Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when every alarm in the space station started screaming at once. He spilled the hot liquid all over his uniform as he rushed to the main control panel. The sensors were going crazy, showing three massive objects that had just appeared at the edge of the solar system. Jake had been stationed on the orbital platform for 2 years. He had seen space junk, asteroids, and even a few comets pass by, but nothing like this. These objects were huge, perfectly smooth, and moving in formation. They were clearly built by someone, and that someone was not human. Down on Earth, Admiral Lisa Harper was having the worst morning of her career. She had just finished her workout when her phone rang with the emergency tone that every military officer dreaded. The voice on the other end was shaking with excitement and fear. "Admiral, you need to get to the command center right now. We have visitors." Lisa threw on her uniform and raced through the halls of the Spacecom headquarters in Colorado. She had trained for this moment her entire life, but she never really believed it would happen. First contact with aliens was supposed to be peaceful, maybe a radio signal from far away. Not three giant ships appearing in their backyard. The command center was chaos when she arrived. Officers were running between computer stations, everyone talking at once. The main screen showed a view from the Hubble telescope, focused on the three alien ships. They looked like nothing humans had ever built, with flowing curves and surfaces that seemed to shimmer in the starlight. Dr. Kevin Walsh, the head of NASA's space tracking department, was standing in front of the screen with his mouth hanging open. He had spent his whole career looking at space, but he had never seen anything like this. "How big are they?" Lisa asked. Kevin checked his readings twice before answering. "The smallest one is about 2 miles long. The biggest one is almost 5 miles. They're made of materials we can't identify, and they're not giving off any heat signatures we can detect." President Nancy Coleman was in the middle of a budget meeting when her chief of staff burst through the door. The look on his face told her everything she needed to know. Within minutes, she was on her way to the secure conference room where the National Security Council was already gathering. The president had been briefed on the possibility of alien contact, but the briefings had always focused on distant radio signals, or maybe finding simple life on Mars. Nobody had prepared her for 3 massive warships showing up in Earth's solar system, back in space. Jake was trying to make sense of what his instruments were telling him. The alien ships were just sitting there, not moving, not communicating. They seemed to be scanning everything in the solar system, their sensors sweeping back and forth like searchlights. Then, without warning, one of the ships began moving toward Earth. The alien vessel was beautiful in a terrifying way. Its hull was perfectly smooth, without any visible weapons or engines. It moved silently through space, covering impossible distances in minutes. Jake realized that these aliens had technology far beyond anything humans possessed. On Earth, every telescope and radar station was tracking the approaching ship. It stopped about halfway between Earth and the Moon, close enough to send a clear message, but far enough away to avoid seeming immediately threatening. That was when the aliens finally decided to talk. The communication came through every radio, television, and internet connection on Earth at the same time. The voice spoke perfect English, though it had a strange musical quality that made it sound almost like singing. "People of Earth, we are the hegemony. We have come to offer you a place in our galactic community." President Coleman listened to the message along with billions of other humans around the world. The alien voice was polite, almost friendly, but there was something underneath that made her skin crawl. "Your species has reached a basic level of space travel, which qualifies you for membership in our organization. As a new member, Earth will provide resources and workers to support the greater good of the galaxy. In return, we will protect you from other threats and share some of our knowledge." Dr. Walsh was frantically taking notes, trying to record every word. This was the most important moment in human history, and he wanted to make sure nothing was missed. "We understand that this may be difficult for your species to accept. Many worlds have trouble adjusting to their new role in the galaxy. To help you understand the benefits of cooperation, we will provide a small demonstration of our capabilities." The alien ship began to glow with a soft blue light. Jake watched from his space station as the vessel extended what looked like a small antenna from its hull. The antenna pointed toward empty space, away from Earth and the Moon. This device contains a small amount of antimatter, equivalent to approximately 100 of your nuclear weapons. We will detonate it in your orbital space to show you the power we possess. Do not be afraid. The explosion will be far enough from your planet to cause no damage. President Coleman felt her blood run cold. The aliens were threatening Earth while claiming to be generous. They were offering protection while demonstrating their ability to destroy the planet. It was the most polite invasion threat in history. The alien ship fired its weapon into empty space. The explosion was visible from Earth as a tiny new star that burned for several seconds before fading away. Every sensor in the solar system recorded the blast, measuring its power and analyzing its composition. Dr. Walsh stared at his readings in horror. The explosion had released more energy than every nuclear weapon on Earth combined. If the aliens had aimed that blast at the planet instead of empty space, it would have been the end of human civilization. As you can see, resistance would be futile and costly, the alien voice continued. We will return in 72 hours to receive your answer. We hope you will choose to join us willingly. The alien ship turned and began moving back toward the other two vessels. The demonstration was over, and Earth had been given an ultimatum disguised as an offer. In the Spacecom Command Center, Admiral Harper was already planning humanity's response. She had spent her career preparing for war against human enemies, but this was something entirely different. How do you fight an enemy that can cross the galaxy in days and destroy planets with single weapons? President Coleman called an emergency session of Congress and the United Nations. World leaders who had been enemies an hour ago were now allies, united by the threat from space. The divisions between countries seemed small and petty compared to the choice between slavery and extinction, but the aliens had made one crucial mistake in their demonstration. They had assumed that the explosion would only be witnessed and recorded by primitive human sensors. They had no idea that their antimatter blast was about to wake up systems that had been sleeping in Earth's orbital space for decades. The electromagnetic pulse from the explosion raced outward in all directions, washing over every satellite, space station, and piece of debris in Earth's orbit. Most of it was exactly what it appeared to be, simple communication satellites and scientific instruments. But some of it was something else entirely, deep and hidden bunkers around the world. Computer systems that had been waiting patiently for years suddenly came to life. Status lights began blinking, screens lit up with data, and communication channels that had been silent started, carrying urgent messages. The aliens thought they had just demonstrated their power to a helpless planet. What they had actually done was trigger the activation sequence for the most sophisticated defense network in human history. They just didn't know it yet. Colonel Amy Rodriguez was deep underground in the NORAD command center when her computer screen started, showing impossible readings. She had been tracking satellites for 15 years, and she knew every piece of metal in Earth's orbit by heart. But now her sensors were detecting objects that weren't supposed to exist. Amy rubbed her eyes and looked at the screen again. The readings were still there. Satellites that had been listed as broken for decades were suddenly sending out signals. Space junk that had been floating dead in orbit was now showing power signatures. Something was very wrong or very right, depending on how you looked at it. She picked up her secure phone and called her supervisor. Sir, we have a problem. Or maybe we don't have a problem. I'm not sure which. 3,000 miles away, Captain Ryan Davis was floating inside the International Space Station when he saw something that made him forget to breathe. Outside his window, a chunk of what he had always thought was space debris was unfolding like a mechanical flower. Solar panels were extending from what had looked like a dead fuel tank, and lights were blinking on surfaces that had been dark for years. Ryan grabbed his camera and started taking pictures. He had been on the space station for 6 months, and he thought he knew every piece of junk in the local area. But the object outside was revealing itself to be something completely different. It wasn't junk at all. It was a machine, and it was waking up. Down in the Pentagon, General Frank Turner was having the strangest phone call of his military career. He was talking to a computer that hadn't spoken to anyone in 30 years. The artificial intelligence? On the other end of the line had a pleasant female voice, but what she was saying was anything but pleasant. General Turner, this is Defense System 7. I have been activated by an electromagnetic pulse consistent with an antimatter explosion. Please confirm authorization to bring all orbital assets online. Frank stared at the phone in his hand. Defense System 7 was a project he had heard whispers about but never seen. It was supposed to be a myth, a story told by old-timers who had drunk too much at military bars. But the voice on the phone sounded very real. Who is this? He asked. I am the Central Coordination System for Project Nightwatch. I was installed in 1987 and have been monitoring Earth's orbital space since that time. My sensors indicate the presence of 3 unknown vessels with advanced technology. Shall I proceed with defensive protocols? Frank felt his hands start to shake. Project Nightwatch was real, and it had been sitting above his head for decades without him knowing about. It in orbit, things that had looked like weather satellites for 20 years were suddenly growing new parts. Captain Janet Brooks, who had been orbiting Earth disguised as a communications technician, finally received the activation signal she had been waiting for her entire career. Janet's weather satellite was actually the command center for orbital defense platform Overwatch 7. She had been living inside it for 2 years, pretending to conduct atmospheric research while actually maintaining a weapon system powerful enough to destroy a city. The antimatter explosion had triggered her activation sequence, and now she could finally drop the pretense. This is Overwatch 7 coming online, she transmitted on a frequency that had been silent for decades. All systems are green and ready for combat operations. Similar messages were coming from all over Earth's orbital space. Satellites that had been playing dead were revealing their true nature. Research stations were extending weapon arrays. Communication relays were powering up targeting systems. The aliens had woken up a sleeping giant, and they didn't even know it yet. Dr. Peter Hendricks was in his laboratory at MIT when his computer started, receiving signals from projects he had worked on decades ago. Peter had spent his career designing ways to hide military equipment inside civilian technology. His job had been to make weapons look like peaceful scientific instruments, and apparently he had been very good at it. The first signal came from a radio telescope that was actually a particle beam weapon. The second came from a GPS satellite that was really a nuclear reactor powering a network of defense platforms. The third came from a space laboratory that contained enough firepower to level a small country. Peter looked at the list of awakening systems and felt a mixture of pride and terror. He had helped build a secret army in space, and now that army was waking up to defend Earth. The question was whether it would be enough against aliens who could travel between stars. Back on the International Space Station, Ryan was watching more and more objects reveal their true nature. What had looked like a dead communications satellite was extending a radar dish the size of a football field. Something that had appeared to be orbital debris was unfolding into a structure covered with weapons that Ryan couldn't even identify. He counted at least 20 objects that were clearly not what they had seemed to be, and those were just the ones he could see from his current position. If there were this many hidden weapons in the local area, how many more were scattered throughout Earth's orbital space? Ryan opened a communication channel to Mission Control. Houston, are you seeing this? Please tell me you're seeing this. The voice that answered was calm but excited. We see it, Ryan. Just keep recording and stay calm. Everything is going according to plan. What plan? Ryan asked. What's going on up here? The plan that's been in place since before you were born, Houston replied. Just document everything, and let us handle the rest. In the NO, our AD command center, Amy was trying to count how many new contacts her sensors were detecting. Every few minutes, another dead satellite would come to life. Another piece of space junk would reveal sophisticated electronics. Another research station would power up weapons systems. The numbers were staggering. Her computers were showing Over 300 objects that had suddenly become active in Earth's orbital space. Some of them were small, probably automated defense drones. Others were huge, the size of office buildings, and clearly designed for serious combat. Amy realized that Earth had been building a secret military presence in space for decades. Every civilian space launch had apparently carried dual purposes, putting both legitimate scientific equipment and hidden weapons into orbit. The result was a defensive network that even most of the military didn't know existed. General Turner was still on the phone with Defense System 7, getting briefed on capabilities he couldn't believe. The AI was explaining that Earth's orbital defense network included particle beam weapons, kinetic bombardment systems, nuclear-powered lasers, and something called quantum disruption fields that Turner didn't even pretend to understand. "How long has this been up there?" he asked. "Construction began in 1962, the AI replied. Major expansion occurred during the 1980s and 1990s. The most recent additions were completed last year. Total defensive capability is classified above your clearance level, but I can tell you that we are prepared for threats ranging from nuclear warfare to alien invasion." Frank laughed despite himself. "Alien invasion? You've got to be kidding." "General, I am detecting 3 alien vessels at the edge of the solar system. Alien invasion is no longer a theoretical concern." The aliens, still waiting at the edge of Earth's space, had no idea what they had triggered. Their sensors were designed to detect obvious military threats, ships, and stations that looked like weapons. They couldn't see through the clever disguises that humanity had spent decades perfecting to alien eyes. Earth's orbital space still looked like a collection of primitive communication satellites, weather stations, and scientific instruments. They saw a planet with basic space technology, not a fortress that had been decades in the making. Their antimatter demonstration had been meant to show overwhelming power to a helpless world. Instead, they had just activated the most sophisticated defense network in the galaxy, and they were about to learn that humans were much better at hiding things than the aliens had imagined. Admiral Void Striker was getting impatient. The alien commander had been waiting for 6 hours since their demonstration, and still no response from the primitive planet below. He had expected the humans to surrender immediately after seeing the power of hegemony weapons. Instead, there was only silence. Tactical Officer Shenka report. Void Striker commanded in the musical language of his people. The younger alien checked his instruments before responding. "Sir, the planet shows increased communication activity but no official surrender message. Their primitive satellites are transmitting more data than before, but nothing we can decode." Void Striker made a sound that was somewhere between a sigh and a growl. "Perhaps they need more time to accept their situation. Move us closer to their world. A more visible presence might encourage faster cooperation." The 3 hegemony ships began moving toward Earth, their elegant hulls cutting through space without any visible means of propulsion. They had done this same routine hundreds of times before. Show overwhelming force, wait for surrender, then begin the process of integrating another species into their galactic empire. But as they moved closer to Earth, something strange began happening to their sensors. Down on Earth, President Nancy Coleman was standing in the most secure briefing room in the White House. The walls were lined with screens showing information that would have seemed like science fiction just hours earlier. Military leaders, scientists, and intelligence officials filled the room, all waiting for her decision. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said, looking at the assembled group. "We have a secret space army that's been hiding in orbit for 60 years. General Turner nodded. "Yes, Madam President. Project Nightwatch has been building defensive capabilities in space since the early days of the space program. Every major satellite launch has carried both civilian and military payloads." Dr. Walsh stepped forward with a tablet full of data. "The system is incredibly sophisticated. We have weapons platforms disguised as weather satellites, communication relays that are actually targeting computers, and research stations that contain enough firepower to fight a small war. President Coleman looked at the main screen, which showed a tactical display of Earth's orbital space. Hundreds of objects were marked with military symbols, each one representing a hidden weapon or defense system. It was beautiful and terrifying. At the same time, and the aliens don't know about any of this? No, ma'am, General Turner replied. Their sensors are looking for obvious military signatures. Our equipment is designed to look like civilian technology. As far as they know, we're still a primitive species with basic satellites. The president walked to the window and looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, alien ships were waiting for humanity to surrender. They had no idea that Earth was about to give them a very different kind of response. Gentlemen, she said, turning back to the room, I think it's time we showed our guests what Earth really keeps in orbit. In space, Captain Janet Brooks was receiving new orders through channels that hadn't been used in decades. Her weather satellite was actually the command center for one of the most powerful weapons in human history. She had been waiting, too. Years for this moment, and now it was finally here. Overwatch 7 to all platforms, she transmitted. Prepare for full revelation protocol. Let's show these aliens what they're really dealing with. All around Earth's orbital space, the same process was beginning. Satellites that had looked broken were extending weapon arrays. Research stations were powering up energy shields. Communication. Relays were revealing their true nature as targeting computers for a network of hidden guns. The aliens were still moving toward Earth when their tactical officer noticed the first anomaly. Sir, I'm detecting unusual energy readings from the planet's orbital space, Shenka reported. The power signatures are much stronger than they should be for primitive technology. Void Striker moved to look at the sensor display. The readings were confusing. The human satellites were showing energy outputs that seemed impossible for their level of technology. Run a full scan? Perhaps their equipment is malfunctioning? But the scan results only made things more confusing. Objects that had registered as simple communication satellites were now showing the energy signatures of military installations. Space junk that had appeared dead was suddenly alive with electronic activity? This makes no sense, Void Striker muttered. How can their technology be so much more advanced than it appeared? On Earth, President Coleman was addressing a joint session of Congress. The speech was being broadcast to every nation on the planet, and to the alien ships waiting in space. She spoke calmly, but her words carried the weight of an entire species. "2. Our visitors from the stars," she began. "We have received your generous offer to join your galactic community. We appreciate the demonstration of your capabilities, and we would like to offer a demonstration of our own." Dr. Walsh was monitoring the alien ships. Communications from his position at NASA, the creatures were clearly confused by the increasing energy readings from Earth's orbital space. Their sensors were detecting more and more activity, but they couldn't understand where it was coming from. "Citizens of Earth," President Coleman continued, "for decades our space program has served two purposes. We have explored the stars and expanded human knowledge. But we have also prepared for the possibility that someday someone might come to Earth with hostile intentions." She nodded to General Turner, who activated a secure communication system. The signal went out to every hidden platform, every disguised weapon, every secret installation in Earth's orbital space. "Authorization code 77 Alpha," General Turner spoke into his microphone. "Begin full revelation sequence." The effect was immediate and dramatic. All around Earth, objects that had looked like peaceful satellites began transforming. Solar panels folded back to reveal particle beam weapons. Communication dishes rotated to show they were actually targeting systems. Research modules opened to display missile launchers and energy cannons. Captain Brooks watched as her weather satellite completed its transformation. The innocent-looking scientific instrument was now clearly visible as a weapons platform, bristling with enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. Similar transformations were happening throughout the orbital network. "This is incredible," she whispered to herself. "We actually built this thing." The alien ships were now close enough to Earth that their sensors could get detailed readings of the orbital space. What they saw made no sense according to everything they knew about human technology. "Sir," Shankar reported with growing alarm, "I'm detecting over 400 active weapons platforms in Earth's orbital space. The energy signatures are consistent with advanced particle beam weapons, kinetic bombardment systems, and nuclear-powered lasers." Void Striker stared at the display in disbelief. "That's impossible." Our advanced scouts reported that this species had barely achieved basic spaceflight. How could they have such advanced weapons? The platforms appear to have been disguised as civilian equipment, the tactical officer replied. "Our sensors were fooled by false energy signatures and camouflaged hull designs. Sir, we are seriously outgunned." President Coleman's voice continued to broadcast across the solar system. "We have been preparing for this day for longer than most of you have been alive. Every satellite launch, every space mission, every research project has contributed to our orbital defense network. We call it Project Nightwatch, and today it wakes up." The aliens found themselves in a situation they had never experienced before. Their 3 ships, which had seemed so powerful when facing a primitive world, were now surrounded by hundreds of weapons platforms. Earth's orbital space had transformed from a collection of harmless satellites into a fortress designed for war. "Shall we retreat, sir?" Shankar asked nervously. Void Striker looked at the tactical display showing Earth's defenses. Every approach to the planet was covered by multiple weapon systems. Every escape route was monitored by targeting computers. The humans had turned their entire orbital space into a trap, and the aliens had flown right into it. "Not yet," he decided. "Perhaps this is some kind of illusion. Surely a primitive species couldn't have built such defenses without us detecting them." But deep down, Void Striker was beginning to understand that the humans were not as primitive as they had seemed. And that realization was about to change everything. Void Striker was beginning to panic, though he would never admit it to his crew. The alien admiral had conquered 47 worlds in his career, and every single one had followed the same pattern. Show force, demand surrender, receive compliance. But Earth was breaking all the rules. Science Officer Telmar explained to me how we missed an entire orbital defense network. He demanded, his musical voice carrying sharp notes of anger and fear. Telmar was the youngest member of the crew, fresh from the Hegemony's military academy. She had studied hundreds of primitive worlds, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this situation. Her instruments were telling her impossible things. "Sir, the humans appear to have developed extremely sophisticated camouflage technology," she reported, her voice shaking slightly. "Every weapon platform was disguised to emit the exact energy signature of civilian equipment. Our sensors classified them as communication satellites, weather stations, and research installations." Void Striker moved to her station and looked at the readings himself. The transformation was still continuing as more and more of Earth's satellites revealed their true nature. What had appeared to be a simple weather monitoring station was now clearly visible as a nuclear reactor powering a network of particle beam weapons. "How is this possible?" he asked. "Our intelligence report said these creatures had barely learned to leave their planet." Down on Earth, Dr. Peter Hendricks was watching the alien confusion with a mixture of pride and amazement. He had spent 30 years of his life perfecting the art of making weapons look like peaceful equipment. His work had been so secret that even most of the military didn't know about it. Peter had started his career as a young engineer working on communication satellites. But in 1987, he had been approached by a group of military officials who had a very different kind of project in mind. They wanted him to design weapons that could hide in space, disguised as civilian equipment. The first challenge had been making a particle beam weapon look like a radio telescope. Peter had solved that by building the weapon inside the telescope, using the same dish for both communication and targeting. The power requirements were hidden by false readings that made the system appear to be a simple research instrument. The second challenge had been even harder. They needed kinetic bombardment systems that looked like GPS satellites. Peter had designed platforms that could launch tungsten rods at planetary targets while appearing to be navigation aids. The launch mechanisms were disguised as antenna adjustment systems, but his masterpiece was the orbital fusion reactors disguised as space laboratories. These massive installations could power dozens of weapons platforms while appearing to conduct peaceful scientific research. The fusion signatures were masked by false energy readings that mimicked biological experiments. 30 years of work, Peter said to himself as he watched the aliens' growing panic. And it's all paying off. In space, Major Sandra Williams was coordinating the revelation sequence from her command position inside a platform that had spent 20 years pretending to be a defunct communications relay. Sandra had been living in the disguised weapons platform for 3 years, maintaining its systems while pretending to be dead space junk. Her job had been one of the hardest in the entire project. She had to keep a nuclear-powered weapons system operational while making it appear completely inactive to any scanning sensors. This meant running on minimal power, using carefully shielded electronics, and even faking the kind of orbital decay that would be expected from abandoned equipment. Phase 3 revelation complete, Sandra reported to Earth Command. All kinetic bombardment platforms are now visible and operational. The aliens can see exactly what they're dealing with. The response came immediately from General Turner. Excellent work, Major. Begin target tracking on the alien vessels. Don't lock on yet, but make sure they know we can see them. Sandra smiled as she activated her targeting computers. The 3 alien ships were well within range of her weapons, and she could see that dozens of other platforms had them covered as well. The creatures had flown straight into the most sophisticated trap in human history. Back on the alien flagship, Telmar was trying to understand how badly they had been fooled. Her computers were analyzing the human deception, and the results were terrifying. Sir, the humans have been building this network for decades, she reported. Some of these platforms were launched as early as 1962. They've been planning for this kind of encounter for longer than our species has known they existed. Void Striker felt something he had never experienced before in battle: genuine fear. The humans hadn't just built weapons, they had built a strategy that had fooled the most advanced military force in the galaxy. They had turned their entire orbital space into a weapon while making it look like peaceful exploration. How many platforms are we dealing with? He asked. Telmar checked her readings again, hoping the numbers would somehow be smaller. Over 600 active weapon systems, sir. And more are coming online every minute. I think they're revealing their entire network. Captain Janet Brooks was experiencing the greatest moment of her career. Her weather satellite had completed its transformation into orbital defense platform Overwatch 7, and she finally had permission to show the aliens what it could really do. The platform was equipped with weapons that most science fiction writers couldn't have imagined. The main gun was a particle beam system that could punch through the hull of a starship from thousands of miles away. The secondary weapons included nuclear-tipped missiles and something called a quantum disruption field that could disable electronics without destroying them. But the most impressive part wasn't the weapons. It was the fact that Janet had been sitting in this incredibly advanced warship for 2 years, while everyone on Earth thought she was studying weather patterns. The deception had been so complete that even her own family didn't know what she really did for a living. Overwatch 7 to all platforms, she transmitted. Target tracking is authorized. Let's show our guests how well we can see them. The effect was immediate. All around Earth's orbital space, targeting lasers began painting the alien ships. The beams were too weak to cause damage, but they sent a very clear message. Every weapon in the human arsenal was aimed at the 3 hegemony vessels on the alien flagship. Alarm sounds began blaring as their sensors detected the targeting beams. Shenka was trying to count how many different weapons were tracking them, but the numbers kept growing. Sir, we have multiple target locks from over 200 platforms, he reported. They have us covered from every angle. Even if we tried to retreat, they could destroy us before we cleared their orbital space. Void Striker looked at the tactical display and realized the full extent of his mistake. The humans had let them get close to Earth not because they were helpless, but because they wanted the aliens to be completely surrounded before revealing their true capabilities. It was the most sophisticated military trap he had ever seen. The humans had spent decades building it, waiting patiently for the day when someone would threaten their world. And when that day came, they had been ready. "Open a communication channel to the human leadership," Void Striker ordered. "It appears we need to have a very different kind of conversation." The alien admiral was about to learn that humans were much better at war than anyone in the galaxy had imagined. And he was going to learn it while surrounded by enough firepower to destroy his entire fleet several times over. The humans had been educated by centuries of warfare against their own species. Now it was time for the aliens to receive their education about what happened when you threatened Earth. Admiral Lisa Harper stood in the Spacecom Command Center, looking at a screen that showed 3 alien ships surrounded by hundreds of human weapons. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, though she had never really believed it would come. Now that it was here, she felt strangely calm. "Open a channel to the alien fleet," she ordered. "All frequencies, maximum power. I want to make sure they hear every word." The communication officer nodded and began the process of establishing contact. Within seconds, a connection was made with the alien flagship. The musical voice of Void Striker came through the speakers, but it sounded very different from the confident tone they had heard earlier. "Human military leader, we wish to discuss the situation," the alien admiral said. "Perhaps there has been some misunderstanding," Lisa smiled. The mighty hegemony admiral was now asking for a conversation instead of demanding surrender. She activated her microphone and spoke in the calm, professional tone she had used in dozens of military briefings. "This is Admiral Harper of Earth Defense Command. There has been no misunderstanding. You came to our world with a threat disguised as an offer. You detonated a weapon in our space to demonstrate your power. We are simply returning the favor by demonstrating ours." She paused to let that sink in before continuing. "The difference is that our demonstration is considerably more impressive than yours." On the alien flagship, Void Striker was studying the tactical display with growing amazement. The humans had built something that defied everything the hegemony knew about primitive species. This wasn't just a defense network, it was a masterpiece of military engineering that had taken decades to complete. "Admiral Harper," he replied, "we had no knowledge of your defensive capabilities. Our intelligence indicated that Earth was a world with basic space technology. We offered membership in the hegemony as we do to all emerging species." Lisa's voice came back with a hint of amusement. "Admiral, we've been monitoring your communications since you arrived. We know about the 47 worlds you've conquered, using exactly the same tactics. Show overwhelming force, demand immediate surrender, and then strip the planet of its resources and people." Void Striker felt his confidence crumbling. The humans had been watching and listening from the moment his fleet entered the solar system. They knew everything about hegemony tactics, which meant they had been preparing for this exact scenario down on Earth. President Coleman was addressing the world from the Oval Office. Her speech was being broadcast not just to every human on the planet, but also to the alien ships waiting in space. She wanted both audiences to understand the new situation. "My fellow humans and our visitors from the stars," she began, "today marks a turning point in the history of our species. For the first time, Earth has been contacted by an alien civilization. Unfortunately, that contact came in the form of a threat rather than a greeting." She looked directly into the camera, her expression serious but not angry. "The hegemony has offered us membership in their galactic community, but they have made it clear that this membership would make Earth a slave world, providing resources and workers to support their empire. This is not an offer we can accept." President Coleman stood and walked to a window that looked out over Washington. "But we want our alien visitors to understand something important. Earth's refusal to join the hegemony as a conquered world does not mean we are opposed to peaceful contact with other species. We are very interested in establishing diplomatic relations with any civilization that approaches us with respect rather than threats." In space, Captain Janet Brooks was monitoring the alien fleet from her position on Overwatch 7. The three ships had stopped moving toward Earth and were now holding position, clearly unsure of what to do next. Their original plan had been destroyed by the revelation of Earth's defenses. "This is beautiful," Janet said to herself as she watched the alien ships on her screens. 60 years of work, and it's all paying off exactly like the planners hoped it would. Her communication system buzzed with an incoming message from Admiral Harper. "All platform commanders maintain target tracking but do not power up primary weapons unless directly threatened. We want to make our point without starting an unnecessary war." Janet acknowledged the order and passed it along to the other platform commanders. The humans were in complete control of the situation, but they were being careful not to escalate things beyond what was necessary. It was a perfect demonstration of military discipline. Back on the alien flagship, Telmar was running calculations that made her increasingly nervous. "Sir, if we attempted to fight our way out of this system, our chances of survival would be less than 5%. The humans have us completely surrounded, and their weapons appear to be as advanced as ours." Void Striker nodded grimly. "What about their offer of peaceful diplomatic contact? Do you think they're being truthful?" The young science officer checked her readings on human communication patterns. "Their broadcast signals suggest they are being honest, sir. They seem genuinely interested in peaceful contact, but only on equal terms. They will not accept the tributary status we typically offer." This was a completely new situation for the hegemony. In their thousands of years of expansion, they had never encountered a species that could match their military technology while still being willing to negotiate. Most advanced civilizations they met were either completely peaceful or totally hostile. Admiral Harper's voice came through the communication system again. "Admiral Void Striker, we understand that you need to report this situation to your superiors. We are prepared to allow your fleet to leave Earth's solar system unharmed. However, we want to make our position very clear." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Earth will not be joining the hegemony as a tributary world. We are prepared to discuss trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and mutual defense treaties. But any future contact must be between equals, not between conquerors and conquered." The alien admiral found himself in a position he had never experienced before. He was being offered a way out of an impossible military situation, but only if he accepted that his intended victims were actually his equals. It went against everything the hegemony believed about how the galaxy worked. "Admiral Harper," he finally responded, "I will need to consult with my government before I can respond." "To your proposal? May we have safe passage to the edge of your solar system?" "Of course," Lisa replied immediately. "But understand that our defensive network extends well beyond Earth's orbit. We have monitoring stations throughout the solar system, and we will know if you attempt to return with reinforcements." President Coleman's broadcast continued from Earth. "To any other civilizations that might be listening to this conversation, Earth extends an open invitation for peaceful contact. We have shown today that we can defend ourselves, but we would much rather make friends than fight wars." She returned to her desk and looked directly into the camera again. "We are ready to take our place in the galactic community, but we will do so as free beings, not as slaves. Any species that approaches us with respect and honest intentions will find Earth to be a valuable friend and ally." As the alien ships began moving away from Earth, Void Striker was already composing his report to the Hegemony High Command. He would have to explain how a supposedly primitive species had built the most sophisticated defense network he had ever seen. He would have to admit that the humans had outsmarted the best military minds in the galaxy, but most importantly, he would have to recommend that Earth be reclassified from potential tributary to advanced military power in the hegemony database. The humans had earned the right to be treated as equals, whether the hegemony liked it or not. As the three alien ships disappeared into the darkness beyond Earth's solar system, the human defense network remained active and visible. Some platforms would return to their disguised states once the immediate threat had passed. but others would remain revealed as a permanent reminder. Earth had announced its presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. The planet that had seemed helpless was actually a fortress, and its people were ready to defend their freedom against any threat that might come from the stars.